Hello everyone, welcome to week 2. This week I want to talk a little bit about some of the importance of point of view and elements of characterization in how we read short stories and novels, and it also reflects on how we watch movies or how we get invested in characters in TV shows. You'll probably notice that I emphasize heavily Harry Potter in one of my discussions, and I think Harry Potter is a great place to start because not only, I'm willing to bet, most of you are well aware of Harry Potter as either the movie franchise or the series of books, but also the stories are very much establishing good and evil, or innocent and wicked, or wise and foolish characters in a way that sets up binary oppositions. So a viewer or a reader automatically is aware of Severus Snape just by the sound of his name, but also how he's characterized as being an evil, dark, or brooding character, whereas Ron Weasley, both by his name and the way he's characterized, as being as a goofy, innocent, lovable, and therefore good character. In a lot of ways, characterization and point of view, I think, mirror or mimic each other. Characterization, of course, is how a character is described, what a character says. If you get inside that character's head, what kind of motivations or thoughts or reasons that character has for acting the way he or she does. And then point of view is how we come to see that character. Right? So while a story may be told in first-person voice, I think, I see, I feel, third-person voice, he thinks, he sees, he feels, or even sometimes, on rare occasions, second-person voice, you think, you feel, you act. A writer choosing to make that point of view, using that point of view, is automatically going to dictate how a reader responds to or understands or comes to identify with what's going on with that character, what's going on in the story, what's going on in the plot, what kind of conflict is there. So the 3 stories I have you look at for today, or for this week rather, The Story of an Hour, Wildwood, and The Things They Carried, I think each one uses point of view as a way to create a character or compelling characters in very interesting ways. Many of you probably have read The Story of an Hour in previous courses. It's a classic, over 100 years now. The first thing to consider is this story was first published in about 1894. What was going on in America in 1894? More specifically, what couldn't women do in 1894? Right? They couldn't get divorced. They couldn't vote. They couldn't handle money. Their opportunities for employment were very limited. They couldn't inherit property or own property outright. A very different kind of social world than what we're used to, political, economic, cultural world than what we're used to. And that is the world of Mrs. Mallard, right? So when she gets news that her husband has died suddenly, and you see at the bottom of that first page where she says, or where she whispers rather, free, 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 she's not a bad character per se. Readers of 1894 would probably come to realize this character suddenly is free because of the binds that 1894 society have placed on her. And that's where the power of the story comes from. Think about how different of a story that would have been had it been told through the perspective of Josephine, her sister, through the perspective of Miss Mallard herself, through the perspective of the doctor who pronounced her dead with the joy that kills, right? Instead, the third-person voice, the third-person narrative, the fly on the wall, the godlike narrator who can see inside her thoughts, hear what she's thinking, is actually a filter by which the reader understands the irony of the situation or the pressure that Miss Mallard is under, understands why Miss Mallard behaves and then exclaims the way she does. Flip that with Lola from Diaz's story, Wildwood. Diaz gets away with a very interesting trick or switch. Interesting to me as an English instructor. He moves between using first-person voice, I feel, I think, I did this, and second-person voice, you did, you feel, you acted this way, which in a typical English essay is a no-no, right? How many of you have ever switched between first-person or third-person voice with second-person and seen big red X marking that out? I know I do that to my English students in my composition classrooms. In fiction, it works a little bit differently. But ask yourself, why does Lola, the character, the speaker of this story, switch between first person, I experienced, I felt my life was waiting to happen, and you did this, you'll yell at your mom, you'll get yelled at by your mom, right? Those moves are intentional. And in a way, it mimics, I would think, the relationship that the speaker has with who that speaker imagines to be listening. I would just say that all first-person narratives are inherently confessional. A first-person narrator is always confessing the story to an imagined listener or imagined audience, right? And that's where the first-person's narrative comes out. In some of my examples in the notes, I have pointed out Huckleberry Finn. Again, a classic that I imagine many of you read or read parts of in earlier classes. That was told through first-person voice. Now, Mark Twain, Samuel Clemens, wrote that as an old man, right? But he put himself in the mind of a 10-year-old boy in a very particular time in American history. When Huckleberry Finn makes sense of the world around him through that first-person voice, a reader automatically filters that and says, for the time, for the day, here's what, when Huckleberry Finn says this, a reader understands. What is that filter telling that reader about that moment, the importance of it, the truth of it, and what is that character, that 10-year-old boy, not seeing that a reader sees? And then on the other end of the spectrum, we have Tim O'Brien's, probably one of the most famous short stories written in the past 50 years, The Things They Carried. Interesting thing to think about this story is, who is the story actually about? Right? Is it about the lieutenant, Lieutenant Jimmy Cross, or is it about his unit? Is Jimmy Cross the main character, or are all of these grunts in this squad the main characters? Who's actually telling the story? Through whose perspective are we most watching these ideas, these suggestions, these actions, these thoughts, and these this understanding of the things they are carrying as being more than just the physical presences there with them? As a reader, we see things mostly through Jimmy Cross's eyes. So are we watching these other characters come and go, these other characters be described, these other characters' understandings through Jimmy Cross, or are we watching for more of a eye in the sky looking down on all of them? As a reader, we know that when we switch, when there's the page breaks, when there's the moves between Jimmy Cross looked at, Jimmy Cross sees, and then the other characters in this squad, we can keep track of it. But it's also interesting that the point of view helps a reader understand the importance of the things, right? And again, I'm saying the things in a very intentional way. The story, the name of the story itself, obviously is referential to the metaphor. They're carrying not just these physical things with them for safety, for luck, for comfort. They're also carrying the weight of war. They're carrying the weight of their friends dying, the weight of trauma, the weight of fear. And so that metaphor between physical things and the emotional weight is very apparent and very much makes the story meaningful. These are just some ideas to think about. In all the stories you read from now on, for this course or any course, I want you to keep track of who's telling the story. And I want you to keep track of how is that point of view then helping you as a reader see the characters, right? The same is go for the movies or the shows we watch. Picture any TV show or movie and ask yourself, does it start out with a voiceover, a character saying, my name is X, here's my story? If so, that's a point of view. If instead it's a show about a series of characters, who do you watch most often? Is that the point of view? Are those the eyes you're seeing the content through? This helps you understand the protagonist, the antagonist, the flat characters, the stock characters, the round versus the static characters, but it also helps you understand what kinds of ideas you're meant to be seeing, what kinds of details or images or character development are you as the viewer or the reader meant to keep track of, and how does that shape your attitude toward characters? How does that shape your understanding of content? Enjoy reading this week. I look forward to seeing what you come up with on discussion boards. As questions arise, please feel free to contact me, and happy typing.